Hey, eCommerce 360 folks. Today we have Warren Pohl, founder of 33Fuel, and natural sports nutrition. They are organic, gluten-free, plant-based nutrition. Wow, that checks all the boxes. Warren, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you, Rev. It's very nice to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me.
That's great. So let us get started. So I'm itching to know the backstory of 33Fuel. I know the heart of any e-commerce is a very compelling story. What's your story like?
So our story probably starts in the Sahara Desert, where I was running a 5-day ultramarathon across 150 miles of the desert. And that's quite a big ask for your body. It's a big challenge. You have to do a lot of training. You also have to get your nutrition right. And at the end of that race, as I staggered across the line, I realized that there was such a problem with sports nutrition. Every other runner on that race, including me, we had problems being sick. We had other stomach issues. We weren't enjoying the event. I mean, some people may think, how could you ever enjoy running across the Sahara Desert? But actually, it can be a beautiful thing when you're training hard and working hard. Things can also be enjoyable, but nutrition was just not helping. And my background prior to the business was as a journalist specializing in sport and human performance for most of the UK newspapers. And as I looked at sports nutrition, it became very obvious where the problem was coming from, because these products were made out of the same ingredients that you primarily found in cosmetics, hair gel, pesticides, and junk foods. And they don't agree with you very well. So I went along with my wife, Erica, who was also doing a lot of long distance triathlon. We went to look for natural alternatives, and there really weren't any. We began making our own, literally as a side project. I mean, we're talking 8, 9 years ago, we first started making products, but just for ourselves. And when they made such a huge impact on our own health and performance, I mean, just as a single example, I lost a lifelong case of asthma after working with some of our products. Now, clearly, I'm one person. It's not like a big scientific study. I didn't change my diet. I didn't change my training. What I did, I used our original product as a daily meal replacement for breakfast. And the asthma just went away. And over the years, we did this on the side alongside our jobs. And in 2017, we're like, we really should push this harder. And that's when we formed the company and really got going. So that's a quick overview of how we got there and where we come to today, which is a long way from the kitchen table.
That's an amazing story. That's a very fascinating story. So there are zillion, like you mentioned, right? There are zillion sports nutrition products out there right now in the market, and a lot of them claim to be vegan, plant-based, absolutely 100% natural, all that, yada yada yada. How did you differentiate your brand, and how did you convince customers to buy your brand? Like, when you started out, it must have been quite hard, right?
It was very hard. I mean, the differentiation for us was that literally we make everything ourselves, so we're not relying on anyone else to make the product for us. So we have total control over how we make it, what ingredients we use, and that enables us to think differently. We don't have any established background in sports nutrition. Like, there are a number of formulation houses who make products for brands, but they do it a certain way and they use certain ingredients. We were able to start from a completely blank sheet and go, okay, if we could make the best possible version of this, because when you use a natural ingredient, something in a lab will be broken down to one property, let's say carbohydrate. Whereas if you then use a natural version, like pineapple or something, you get all of the carbohydrate plus anti-inflammatories, extra vitamins, natural painkillers, all these other things in the parcel. So when you combine lots of those ingredients correctly, you get a huge difference in performance. But of course, the problem with any e-commerce store is actually linked to the Sahara. When you open one, you might as well have opened a shop in the desert, because nobody knows you're there. The internet is a busy place. You don't exist. You might be there, but until you can get people to find you. And we really started in the world we knew of long distance triathletes and ultra marathon runners, just saying, hey, would you like to try this? And reaching out to anyone we could find and just very, very slowly getting it going. But we did have one hit, a proper home run very early on. We got featured in one of the newspapers. I had written a piece for them about an extreme race that I had run. It's a 100-mile mountain race in the Alps where you run the whole thing in up to 48 hours without stopping. And I'd written about that. And I asked them, I said, would you mind if we put in a piece on nutrition? I said, full disclosure, it's a company my wife and I have just started. And they said, no, we can put that in. So they wrote a little piece about nutrition for races like this and mentioned our URL. And that gave us a really big start from zero. And then, of course, after that, you have to start growing the momentum and the retention. And I think in those early days, we didn't really know anything about retention. So our e-commerce store version 1 was a very leaky bucket. I'd like to think it's a lot better now.
That's great. That's very inspiring. So I see that you are very popular in FB and Instagram, and of course in YouTube as well. So what's the weapon of choice? What's the social media that you're really, crushing it on?
Well, I think I can safely say that the social media we are crushing it on right now is none of them. What I can definitely tell you is that we are actually in the process at the moment of working through our channels and rebuilding and refocusing. It's likely Instagram, TikTok, and Google Ads are going to be the initial drivers based on the research to date, because we're aware that as the brand has grown, and any e-commerce business founders out there would probably understand this, you don't work on everything at once. You build the piece layer by layer, and we haven't really revisited our social channels and content properly for a year. And it's obvious now that they're okay, but they could be much better. And so we're working on that. And I think the most recent realization is, yes, we're not crushing any of them. And what we need to do is clean them up and focus on them to try and drive some more of that, because certainly Facebook ads have been an expensive dead end primarily to date.
That's very interesting. I think most of the brands will agree to that. So I just was browsing through your PR and I found that Chrissy Wellington has been an ambassador for 33Fuels ever since your early days. And Chrissy Wellington, for listeners who don't know, she's a multiple Ironman world champion. And let's talk a little bit about leveraging, micro influencers and influencers for brand visibility, especially for a fitness brand and fitness supplement brand. How important is it?
I think, and again, looking at part of this strategy, influencers can be a really important way of getting your product out to a lot of people. So what they do, if you get it right, is they create that moment that something like a physical event would do. So for sports nutrition, it's very common to sponsor events or sample product at races. But for a smaller brand, or for us as a natural brand, we spend so much more on what is in our product that if we go and try and sample at the level of a major competitor, like they're spending a fraction of what we do on their ingredients. And we just can't compete in that space. And I think a lot of smaller brands would empathize with that. But also, as we take that business model forward, we sell direct to consumers. We're a digitally native brand. So we can spend much more on the product to make a difference for the consumer, but we can still maintain a margin for a business. But it doesn't make us so strong at doing physical events. So this is where influencers can really start to bridge that gap as people relate to people they know or respect or like or understand, as they help spread your message for you. With Chrissy Wellington, who, as you said, 4-time Ironman world champion, she's never been beaten over the Ironman distance. She raced 12 races. She won every single one of them. I mean, she's an outstanding international athlete. And that was really a piece of luck where we connected on a values level, a friendship level, an emotional level, and a sporting level, to the point where she just said, I want, her current sponsorship deal was coming to an end. She said, I want to work with you guys. And she's actually become a shareholder as well as an ambassador since then. And I think if you're building a brand, you have to be open to the opportunity because, sure, some are influencers, you may need to pay something. Some you may find a connection. Just be aware open to all of the options.
I think a lot of insights from that particular conversation. So let's talk about metrics, right? It's very, very important to running an e-commerce store. So what are your North Star metrics like? Is it ROI? Is it CAC? Or is it CLV? What are your metrics like?
I think probably the biggest ones for us, just for simply taking the pulse of the business, revenue versus previous quarter versus previous year. That's very important just to keep an eye on. Are we going in the direction we need to? Are we hitting the goals we need to? Within that, conversion rate is incredibly important, simply because you can pump the traffic up, but you need to make sure it's converting. And at least by monitoring that, you can tell, are your efforts working or not? Because there's no point in pouring a huge amount of traffic into something that isn't working. So conversion ratio, but also repeat business, because we are not, for example, a mattress brand, for example, they're not really a repeat purchase. They're every 10 years, maybe. Realistically, for FMCG or fast moving consumer goods brands like us, you're looking for that repeat rate. So we work very hard on repeat as much as we do on bringing in.
So that was going to be my next question. It was about, I know it's very relatively easy to make your first purchase, but repeat sales is going to be tough, especially for a brand like yours. You would need a lot of loyal customers and a lot of support flowing in, even from a brand, quality perspective. It's validating and customers come back to you for more and more of your products. How do you maintain retention, or how do you go after repeat sales?
So the first piece of the retention puzzle, I think, is knowing who you want to bring in the first place, because there are plenty of people who may buy once, but if it's not really the product for them, you kind of spent money to get them, you got a one hit, but it's not a sustainable business. So look at, are you bringing the right sorts of people in to start with? And assuming that's in place, then your checkout experience is good. Your website experience, checkout experience will be important, as will something you would know about, particularly in the UK, shipping. In the US, next day shipping is not so much of a thing. But because the UK and a lot of European countries are smaller, next day shipping is almost becoming expected. So either you offer it, but communication through that process is very important for the overall customer experience. Don't ever forget, as an online brand, the real experience of the product when it arrives. What does the consumer get? We put a flyer, handwritten note, that kind of stuff in with the product, something. You can't ever expect people to always remember you. So also look at your packaging. That's part of retention. That's the product that the customer is going to have in their home when a friend comes over and says, hey, what are you using? Or simply picks it up and has a look. So don't discount using your packaging to tell the story and engage the customer. We're big on doing that, and we're doing even more of that going forward. And then there are the usual tools. Of course, there's social, of course, there's remarketing, advertising, but email as well. The sort of automated but very personalized email based on customer behavior or lack of it, to either encourage them to order again, reward them for a certain order. And we tried to really avoid one of the problems that mobile phone providers have, of kind of the new deal and the special offer is always for the new customer. Well, why don't you make them for the existing customer as well? You can't necessarily do that every time, but if someone orders with us 3 times, well, they're definitely going to get a special offer. There's going to be more of that coming as they keep going down the journey. So, don't just think about the first timers. Those are probably the key parts of that puzzle for us at the moment.
What about your average order value? Does it increase on repeated sales, or does it just stagnate? Or usually what we have noticed is the first order is lower in value compared to the subsequent orders, depending on the kind of, again, the quality of customers and how well they like your product. What has been your observation like as the number of orders increase, as the average order value increase as well, or does it stagnate? It's just the same amount.
It's a really interesting point, that, because average order value is obviously very important, but within that it covers a multitude of different points. And you're absolutely right that if we segment it by number of orders, the average first order is around half the amount of our overall average order value for the store. So they do increase with time, and they tend to they'll bump up quite significantly between orders 2 and 3. Then they tend to plateau, and when people pass the 10 order mark, that's where they start going up again.
Okay, got it. And the frequency of order for your store would be like once in 2 months, once in 3 months. How often do customers order?
So for us, they're about every 6 to 8 weeks is roughly where it's at. But there are some people we have who literally, and I think this is an important point for email marketing, as long as people have consented to the email and the unsubscribe options are very clear, I think you can keep people on the list a lot longer than plenty. Or so our experience has been, you can keep people there longer than a lot of popular advice has said, because we get people who maybe don't order for a year or two, and then they come back and they're making regular orders again. And it could be they were working in another country, or they had children, or whatever it is, but they pick up their training again and they come back. So within that, 6 to 8 weeks is a standard amount, but literally within that, there's such a broad spread, again, like the average order value, where some people, they're with us for a long time, then they disappear and we think they've completely gone. You notice 2 years later, they're back. So
That's a very interesting observation. So we were talking about shipping challenges earlier, right? So do you see shipping notifications as something that solves the problem as far as shipping is concerned? Because order fulfillment is going to be a huge nightmare for e-commerce. That's one of the biggest challenges of e-commerce. And how do you go about solving that challenge?
So I think it's something we still need to keep working on. So our store's based with Shopify, which does give you a good amount of out-of-the-box options, but that customer communication is key. And definitely post-Brexit, shipping costs have increased. Shipping times have increased, less so in the UK, but certainly for our European customers. And that communication side is key. So on the one hand, having our own team who look after those emails when they come in, but really, a bit like what you're suggesting, you need to do as much as possible on the communication before that, so you don't get those emails in the first place. And very rarely is it people who are worried about an order being late or anything like that. If they just know where it is and when it's coming, and that's it within the time frame that you've delivered as an expectation, that's it. But I think that requires a lot more communication than it did even 3 years ago.
Absolutely. I think customers are more demanding right now. They expect complete transparency as far as shipping is concerned. And that brings us to the question about what are your future aspirations like? Are you going to expand your product line? Are you going to go global? What is it like? What are your ambitions for the brand?
So the mission that we are on is building a fitter future, and that's both for people who are active doing their sport by giving them sports nutrition products that don't just fuel their sport right now, they'll do that, but they'll fuel their health over the long term. So because you're only ever consuming something very natural and very nutrient dense, you get a number of health and performance benefits. So that's fitter for people. But everything we do, our products are plant-based, and we say that everything is planet-based as well. So we're always looking at the maximum sustainability. How do we create a fitter future for the planet? No point in creating a bunch of super fit humans if the planet's in a mess. So we've got to look after both of those. A long part of that, building that future though, global is a broad word. We're not big enough for that yet. So the aim is complete dominance within the UK. I mean, we do already sell in 30 countries. So we have a presence as many European countries, Canada, US, Hong Kong, Singapore, but we don't yet have the muscle to really drive those territories. So the aim is first to really become the dominant force in the UK market, and then to gently roll that out across Europe and North America. So we have a lot of people left yet to to work with. So it's certainly not finished yet.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So one last question to wrap up. What kind of advice would you provide to any e-commerce fitness brand? What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong currently?
So I think there's so much to be gained in the fitness space at the moment. A lot of people want to look after themselves a lot more, and anyone who can clearly solve a problem and deliver a simple solution to that is going to be in a good place if they can tell a good story around it and connect with the end consumer. Because the risk in the sports space is it's very easy to go, well, there's a number of people who are keen on their sport, and they have, this is their average income, and this is their disposable income, and here's what the market is forecast to grow by. So if we launch X, then we will be selling 10 times that in 5 years' time. And of course, everyone knows it's not as simple as that. But even that case itself, the problem is there's a lot of noise in the sports space. There is a lot of noise. I mean, our space is a classic for that. You want to buy a vegan protein bar, there's about 1,000 of them out there. How do you stand out? Like, if we just made protein bars, I don't think we'd even be in business. People come to us for other products, and then they find the protein bars. Then if we had to lead with a protein bar, I think it would be suicide. So you need to find a way to stand out and connect with people. And it is cheesy, but authenticity goes a long way, and naivety goes a long way, because within the sports space, a lot of people do things the way they do it because that's how it's always been done, not because it's necessarily the best way. So yeah, if you can find those things and find an authentic way to tell the story and connect with people, I think you've really got a chance. But if you simply want to, I think if you're looking at it just from a financial point of view, well, this market's popular, I'll do vegan protein. It's not going to work.
Bust, I think, because of the market size is so huge, and almost every other day, at least in Insta, you're like spammed with so many ads about protein-based products. So yeah, it's a very tricky market to be in. So great, thank you so much, Warren, to come on to our show and talk about your sports nutrition product. And we hope that you grow massively. You grow more than what you are right now next time we have a chance to speak. But thank you so much for coming on our show and letting our listeners know the value and authenticity is what is going to drive your progress. Thank you so much.
Hey, Rev, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure connecting with you today. So thank you very much for the invite in the first place, and love the show.